Welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Join us here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first. Suzanne Rodriguez is a pioneer. She was a jockey at a time when there were very few women in that industry, and it's just the beginning of her book entitled Shaken, Not Stirred.
My husband was a jockey in Mexico and in Florida and in various parts of the U.S. I was one of the first female jockeys in the UK. That's what I wrote in my book, because it was, it's a very misogynistic career. Or industry, I should say. So being a woman wanting to be a jockey was rather looked down upon in those days.
I would think they would have made it very difficult for you to achieve that.
Oh, they did, but we were only licensed as amateur. So that was all right, because then you were riding on the professional track with all the rules and regulations, but you were not doing it professionally, so you were not considered a risk to all the professional jockeys. And it was just, in those days, it was just women against women. And then they opened up the races, and they made the races still amateur, but you had men that you were racing against as well. And I eventually wanted to win a jump race, because that's a real challenge. It's 3 miles over like 24 fences. Big fences, and it's really exciting. It's great to do, but that was my final ambition, and I achieved that. And then that's when I stopped riding as a jockey, but came over to the US to work as an exercise rider, which in Southern California you can earn a good living doing. So exercise the racehorses in the morning. You just gallop them slowly, or if you're small, which I am, you work them fast, you breeze them.
That must have been a really interesting career.
Oh, it was fascinating. It was great. And when I got my trainer's license, that was even more fun to do.
Tell me how you lay out your book.
I started it more as when I decided, I did one chapter about my original heritage. I mean, I came from a fairly wealthy family, and I had a very beneficial youth. I was in a private school and traveled a lot. I had a great life, and happily married parents and a sister. So that was a good family, which gave me the strength then to handle all the things which in the book I write about, all the disasters I had. We had some awful things happening to us. But we handled the disasters to stay together. We've been married now 39 years. And now, happily retired in Mexico in our own house.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in London. Okay. And then my parents moved to the suburbs of London. And then I went to a boarding school in the New Forest. That's in Hampshire.
Okay. What made you want to be a jockey?
I loved horses. I loved riding horses. And I used to ride jumping horses, show jumping. There's pictures on the front of the book. I mean, have you seen the book?
I've seen yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
Oh, you are? Well, that's me when I was then in my early 20s competing jumping. I rode in jump races, in jump competitions, and I also did a little 3-day eventing. But that's a very testing life to do that. I mean, you don't make any real of a career. So when girls were first licensed to be jockeys, I thought, well, that's going to be my career. I'm going to get into the racing industry.
Was your family supportive of that?
Yes, they were. They thought I was a bit crazy.
Right.
But I was a very self-willed young person. Whatever I said I wanted to do, I used to go ahead and do it, whatever they said.
Well, how did you meet your husband?
On the racetrack in Southern California, at a track called Hollywood Park that now has been closed and a big, huge development there. It's in Inglewood, in Los Angeles.
You said that you endured some disasters.
Oh, well, I broke my femur. Oh, I was riding basically an unbroken racehorse. But it was a job that I took that for one day. And there was an untrained racehorse that I should never that should never have been on the racetrack. It was preparing horses for what they call a breeze-up sale, where horses breeze fast for a short distance, and then the buyers watch them and decide which horses are worth bidding on. And that's what the horse was there for. And it was a bad outfit. It was my first day of the job, and before I got on that last horse, I thought to myself, I'm not coming back here tomorrow. And of course, I didn't come back the next day because I was in hospital with a broken femur. The horse was crazy. I mean, she did went into complete drop and threw me sky high, and I came spiraling down and had an awful crack and excruciating pain. And in fact, that's part of the chapters are chapter 28 and 29, and that's part of the book that I'd love to get publicized, because I had a terrible treatment by the hospital. It was a workers' comp injury, but they wouldn't do anything, give me any analgesic, any pain relievers, until they knew exactly who the coverage was with.
Oh.
It was terrible. It was terrible. I mean, I was in unbelievable pain with, femur is the biggest bone in your body, and it was shattered into three pieces.
Oh, my God. That's horrible. Well, I mean, how many years ago was that?
That was about 35 years ago, a long time ago.
Yeah. So were you married then?
Yes. We got married when I was like about, I think, 35. And my husband is a couple of years younger than me, but, we're very similar in age in that way. I never thought that I would stay happily married to a Mexican American. And I thought he'd probably stay with me maybe 2 or 3 years, and that would be it. We're still together. So that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, because two people who are incredibly different from totally diverse backgrounds, and yet we had the karma. We just clicked together. We both love animals. That's one of the things that always keeps us together. I mean, the main business that we really did was I got my trainer's license in Southern California and started training horses. And that was much more of a career.
Okay.
A remunerative career. Because you get paid by other people to train their horses, and if you win races, you get a big percentage. So it's a business. It's an industry. He helped me with the training very much. I wouldn't have been able to do it without his support.
Yeah.
I used to be more of the handicapper, the one. That's what the gamblers are called, handicappers. I used to work out the right races for the horses, and my husband would do all the hands-on work. With making sure that the grooms did the right thing and making sure everything was done right with the horses and checking the legs and all the basics of racehorse training, other than the handicapping and putting the horses in the races, which is what I did.
So what made you write this book now?
I'm retired, and I love to write. And because I was a pioneer in the industry, there was something to write about. And then also being a trainer in Southern California and winning races, that was quite an achievement. So, I wanted to write the stories about that. I mean, the last race, serious race we won was at Santa Anita, and the jockey who rode the horse is a jockey called Flavien Prat, and it was his first win in the U.S., and he's now one of the leading international jockeys, leading American jockeys in the world, and he got his first win on our horse.
It's amazing. What a life you've had.
Yeah, well, it's been a very exciting life. That's why I wrote the book. We also had a farm, Temecula, and that's where the horse was bred. The horse that won that race with Flavien Prat riding. It was 50-1 too, because I was not a big trainer at all, and the horse hadn't won a race for quite a long time, and but the jockey was brilliant, and the horse felt like really running a good race that day, and the two of them won. It was very exciting at 50-1.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've always been a writer, I guess.
Yeah, I started writing when I was about 9 years old. Yeah, my parents lived near London, and there's a big park there called Richmond Park, and that's where I learnt to ride riding in Richmond Park, which was a lot of fun. And I loved horses. I have an affinity with animals, and animals sense that. And horses used to. There were horses that I used to be asked to ride for some trainers, but other riders couldn't manage, and then they used to ask me specifically to get on that horse, and the horse would be fine with me. A lot of times, mares, female horses, were like that, and they loved me, but they didn't want anyone else. So I didn't write much in the book about that, but it was definitely part of a good reference, and it was a good way of earning a living doing something I love, having that affinity with the horses.
I mean, I've heard a lot about that. I've never experienced that, but it must be really magical, when you have that kind of connection.
It is magical. It's amazing. I mean, horses will just feel comfortable with me. They feel happy. They feel safe. Horses have two methods of defense from predators, and one is speed, and the other is sensitivity. They can sense good or bad vibes very, very quickly. I would love to get some of the big media to pick it up especially because of for two reasons. Because I was a pioneer in a very, very misogynistic industry. That was one, and the other because I had that terrible accident. I'd love to be able to publicly talk about that. There should be no question in the U.S., the wealthiest country in the world, and it was in California, the wealthiest state in the U.S., that anyone with an emergency terrible injury, that should be any questions about their treatment. It just be automatic, like it is in all the other major countries in the world. I think it's terrible that I went through that. So I wanted to publicize that. I know it was a long time ago, but the book's only just been published a few months, so it's recent.
Well, are you promoting your book from where you are?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've sold I sold about 50 books, either the online version or the actual books, the hard copy books. I talk to people. I have a gig working in an art gallery, and when I'm there, and I have to prioritize the art because it's beautiful art that's been sold. But then I often talk to people and pull out my book and show them and tell them they can buy it online. And 99% of people I show it to say, yeah, we'll do that. That sounds really interesting. They look at the front page of the book and the back cover, the synopsis, and are interested. So I've been doing it that way, or I go and sit in an open-air restaurant and take the book round and talk to people. And when I have lots of actual books, I just sell them a book there and then.
That's great.
And that's been
good for you. A lot of people can't do that. It's hard for people to go up to someone and say, hey.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a good story and I'm a good salesperson.
Yeah, I can tell.
So
well, I'm really glad I tracked you down.
Okay, thank you for calling. Well, thanks for calling.
You got it. Victoria Wolf joins us on Zoom from across the pond. She grew up in Washington, D.C., got a degree in psychology, worked for the parole board. Then she went to England, graduated from the School of Economics, opened up a financial consulting firm. Life was good. And then the stalker happened. It's all in her book entitled For the Love of a Psycho. What happened?
Absolute horror. Because I've loved cats all my life, I had somebody come in to install a cat flap. It was that's naive and surreal. So the guy comes in to install a cat flap. I'm married, living my life. The cat flap guy shows up again and asks me to marry him. Obviously not normal. something was wrong with him. That's pretty obvious. Not that I'm not attractive, but not that attractive. Anyway, that guy starts stalking me. And he wasn't happy just to stalk me. He was scaring me to death. He was in front of my job. He was permanently in front of my house. Because I was registered, you have to register. It's quite the company was running smoothly at the time, but you have to be registered with various agencies and government stuff here in England if you're going to do any kind of finance. Well, he tried to insinuate all sorts of things to shut my business. I had a solicitor who was an idiot, a lawyer. All he could do was just invoice me for money. I went to the police and told them what was happening. They went and barged into his apartment, found 254, literally, pictures of my bedroom windows, and told me, yeah, and they got his phone records. Now, this is going into a whole year. It went on for almost 3 years. I was one of those women that he's not going to move me from my house. He's not going to ruin my life. Well, he did everything. He ruined my life. I had to make a run for it in the middle of the night and leave the old house where I lived, where he knew where I lived, with lights going on and off, so he would think I was still there. He kidnapped my cats. I mean, it was a nightmare. I went to the police a million times. They didn't do anything. I called the police a million times. They didn't do anything. In the end, I went there, spoke to a senior inspector, and he said to me that they're not here to prevent crimes.
What does that mean?
I said, are you saying I have to be stabbed or something? Well, he goes, in essentially, yes. And he goes, hey. So I was at home a lot, more and more and more, because he was following me everywhere. And the police wasn't doing anything about it. You see, in England, self-protection, protecting your property and your life is not an issue. It doesn't exist. So they were not going to do anything until I was harmed. So you take him to court. I got an injunction, one of those restraining orders, that he couldn't contact me, but nothing happened. He broke it 50 times, and they told me it was up to me to prove that he was breaking it. In the end, literally, I just moved. I moved to this village here. I didn't give out my address. I didn't leave my address. I shut my business. Later on, I sold it. And I've been here now for 15 years. I started writing the book when I started being hassled and sitting home and living in fear. Until I moved, I was completely paralyzed. I couldn't go out. I couldn't go to work. He was permanently behind me around. It was just a proper lunatic stalker that the police wouldn't do anything about. And this went on, as I said, I was trying to keep my life as it was, because it was a good life. I liked my company. I developed it well. I liked everything about my life. And all of a sudden, I find myself sitting home. Now, I knew he was a psychopath. I know what a psychopath is. I've got a degree in psychology. I worked in the jail. I know they have no conscience, no this, no that. So I started reading up on it to understand what was happening to me. And I realized, unless you're a psychologist, even more, unless you're a scientist, these books are not written for normal people. They're not going to warn me. I'm not going to understand. A lay person is not going to understand 2/3 of it, because it all seems to be written from one expert for another expert. But to tell you what this guy looks like, what you're going to feel, how he reacts, how to get away from him, nothing. Absolutely nothing. So I started writing, and I was thinking to myself, well, me going into another explanation, pure explanation of what this man is, who he is, to stay away and how dangerous they can be. By this time, I've already mastered statistics, how many women in the world, in London, in the US of A, everywhere, were stalked, how many, 64% of them get killed in the end. And these horrible things, which you can find all in my book. And I realized really that there is no defense, especially in a country where he's bigger and stronger and crazier than I am. I can't have pepper spray, it's against the law. I can't have a gun, it's against the law. How could I defend myself? I can't beat him up. And if I get a great big killer dog, they're forbidden as well. You can't have one. They're called dangerous dogs. And if I did get one, he would eat my cats. So what am I supposed to do?
And he never found you again? Like, is he still out there?
He's still out there. He never found me again. That's why I'm using Victoria Woolf, which isn't my name. Now, I live in this picturesque English quaint village. This quaint village is one of the richest parts of the UK. So everything is very hoch and posh and all this. I'm the only person, not that I only have cameras around my house, but I'm the only village person who has metal doors in front of my normal door, so that if I open the door and see him, he can't come in because I'm not unlocking the metal door.
That's crazy.
It was a completely insane thing. So then I wrote little poems and then an explanation. If you look at the book, you'll see they're not even poems. They are stories in verse as to what's happening to her, what he thinks, what she thinks. In between the poetry part, which is a story of who feels how and who's doing what, why, there's a character in the book called the Doctor. He gives semi-scientific explanations, but simplified, as to why this is happening. So this goes through 8 chapters. And then, like the story in verse, so it's nice to read and happy to read, and you can empathize. You can feel what she feels in the story, and you can see what he feels in the story. And every chapter starts with, there's a square, it's pulled out in the book, the square, with statistics, which are actually the saddest part of the book. The reality of it.
What's the most frightening statistic?
That depending on which country, between 64 and 82% of the women stalked are killed. 81% of stalkers are men. Women are more or less unprotected victims, completely sitting ducks. They can't do anything about anything. And the scariest part of the book is how they don't really just pretend in order to get you and then to abuse you. And as a very good female scientist writes about this as well, their main weapon is pity. They're the guys that beat you up and somehow make you feel sorry for them.
Oh.
If you've had any life experience, and if you had a friend who had one of these boyfriends or husbands, you will know that this exists.
If you're basically in hiding, how do you go out and talk about your book?
I don't do a book signing in the UK.
Okay, but you could do one in America. You feel
I can do one in America. I can do one anywhere else. I could do a secret underground one here, I suppose.
You could wear a bag.
I could wear, yes, a bag over my head. I could have done that a long time ago, but I think he would have figured it out. He was this crazy Irishman who's actually not crazy. He's just a psychopath.
Do you think he's moved on to someone else now?
I wouldn't know. I presume, knowing how they function, that he would need a new victim. And I presume that once he couldn't find me anymore, maybe he looked for a while. This is just presuming. He's been seen by a friend of mine, well and alive. But presuming, the way these people function, psychopaths function, they will need somebody to replace you with.
Right.
The emotional high that they get on by capturing somebody and then abusing them and proving how they're the big guy and you're nothing.
But if he has committed a criminal act, would you know about it? Would you be able to find out about it?
Not in England. No, not in England. There are no public, like sex offenders, criminal. There's no registers. You know what you're used to in America?
Yeah. You
can look up if, I don't know, your daughter's going out with a pedophile. You can check, but you can't do that here. You can call the police. You can explain to them. They won't tell you anything. There are no publicly. Everything is considered personal.
Oh my gosh.
And all information is considered protected. So there is absolutely no way I can find out without going and looking for it.
So what is your plan moving forward?
Well, I lead a normal life here, quite normal. I go see my granddaughters and my son. My life, I'm 71. I'm writing another book. In the village, everybody knows me by my alias, so nobody can really, communicate the fact that I live here. So nothing. I try to live as normal as possible with my cameras and all my doors.
And everybody knows you as Victoria Woolf.
Yeah, everybody. Well, here, yes, and I am now Victoria Woolf. That way the postman can't find me. Nobody can find me.
Yeah.
I wrote this book to warn women that there are men like this, that if they look around themselves, they will see a friend, a relative, a neighbor, somebody suffering. They will have a friend who went through a relationship and came out without any money, self-esteem minus 20, and confused. What the hell happened? He was such a nice guy. And then he turned. Everybody will know or have heard a story of this kind. And this book is easy to read. It is easy to understand. You can empathize with the main character, which is me. It is completely authentic. I went through everything I wrote about. That's why I found it easy to write.
Yeah.
Because it's all completely me. It is what I went through. It is what I know. And it's just padded by the doctor's statements with science. Not a lot and not too deep, enough for you to understand it and to be able to use it as a functional principle without any academic waves that nobody can understand but other academics, and they don't help anybody else. If he shows up again, I still don't have a gun. I still don't have a dangerous dog.
Do you have a baseball bat? Can I ask you that? Do you have a baseball bat?
I have a baseball bat. I have a crowbar.
There you go. There you go. Listen, thank you so much. I'm glad we were able to connect.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
Good luck with your book. My God, stay safe.
I am safe, and I intend to stay safe. We'll see.
All right.
We'll see. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Susie G works with predatory beetles that kill invasive species on hemlocks, which sounds very interesting to me and a story in itself. But that's just one of the many unique things about the author of What is Santa Claus? When did you start writing, Susie?
Well, probably about 2 years ago is when I actually wrote this book. And it kind of was just one of those things about a year ago. I was just online. I don't get bored because I have 2 kids, but I was bored for like 15 minutes in last November and saw a thing for this publisher that was looking. And I was like, okay. So I sent it in and they accepted it. I was like, oh, okay. Like, I really wasn't prepared. Like, it's something I would love to do, but I didn't figure I'd get anything. So I didn't really know what to do with that.
Did you write in high school or college or anything?
I mean, I would do like small little poemy song type of things, but I never attempted to do anything like with too much seriousness. It was just kind of like a fun side thing that I did.
So you were bored and you just said, I think I'll write a Santa book.
Oh, well, I was bored when I found the publisher. The Santa book came along. I don't know what I was doing. I was in a Christmas mood, whatever I was doing, like a good year before I got the publishing deal. And this kind of concept came into my head and it kind of just started rhyming. And I was like, okay, like, where do I go with this? So I just wrote it out. And then I was like, okay, that was cool. That was fun. Don't know what I'm going to do with that. And just kind of put it off to the side until I saw there was actually publishers like looking for people. And I was like, oh, okay. So I just pulled it out.
Is it a rhyming book?
It is. It's called What is a Santa Claus? And it's a children's book. It does rhyme because I do like to rhyme. And it's basically my motivation behind it was I kind of was frustrated with how Santa Claus became like just another disciplinarian, because his whole backstory, like, there were people in multiple countries, usually like monks or priests or something, that would around Christmas time give children stuff in stockings, and it was usually orphans or poor children. So they were the inspiration for Santa Claus, and it was supposed to be sort of a selfless, these people can't do anything for you, but you're going to do something for them anyways because they matter. And yet Santa Claus kind of just became, if you don't behave, you're not getting anything. And that's not the point behind what he was originally supposed to be in tradition.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not something you can fully unpack in a children's book, but I just wanted to send them in the direction of, like, Santa Claus, or the idea of Santa Claus is to be kind and caring and considerate no matter what, basically. In the illustrations, there's a mom and a son, but for the story, it's talking to the audience, to the reader, kind of also maybe a little internal dialogue for children. What is a Santa Claus? Like, what is it about? Is it about the reindeer and the sleigh and the suit and all this. And then it's like, no, it's not. It's not about that at all, because what it is being kind and caring about other people. And
All right. So can you read a little bit of it for me?
yeah, give me 1 second.
Is it a short book?
It is a short book. It's got I think 12 pages. It's just a little one. It's basically the same shape and size as hey, no barking, Charlie. It's basically the same size and shape as a Curious George size and style.
Okay.
Let me start from the beginning.
Okay.
All right. So it says, what is a Santa Claus? What is a Santa Claus? Is it a person who helps just because with no want or need for applause? Is it what he is, or is it what he does? He is kind but hard to find. Is he far away? It may seem that way.
And then on each page there's a picture.
Yeah, each page has a picture. The illustrator let me kind of describe what I wanted to see, and they made it for me. So that was quite nice.
Are you happy with the illustrations?
I am. I was kind of I'm not sure, when you have a picture in your mind and you're like, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to have them get exactly what I'm picturing.
Right.
And they did quite well.
How old are your kids?
I have a daughter that's 6.5 and a son that's 5.
Okay. So have you read the book to them?
Yes.
What do they think?
They loved it. Yes.
And have you read it to their friends?
I've read it to some of their friends. I gave it to their friends and my nephews and nieces and stuff, and they loved it as well. They're a little bit older, but they still thought it was very, very cute. They liked it.
So you wrote this a year ago, and you really didn't get it published in time for Christmas this year.
I know. It took almost, from last November to this September for the publishing process. So it technically came out the very tail end of September. So I almost had it, but yeah. But there's, it's always next year. Christmas is every year.
Right. And any ideas?
I'm working with a store. I'm kind of late. We're probably going to end up having to focus on a next year type of a deal, but I'm working with a few local stores to see if I can get it in there.
I don't know. I would look at it as an opportunity. You have an opportunity to spend an entire year making contacts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going for. Trying to get it to because there is a little commercial on YouTube for it that's absolutely adorable, set to music, just a little bit on it, and I want to kind of get that to get traction, but I'm also working on getting up a Facebook page. So
all right, so now you have time to work on your Facebook page and make it real, holiday-ish.
Yeah, get it out there. And then also I think there might be some Facebook advertising coming in.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Are you going to keep writing?
I am. Actually, children's books ideas, I have plenty.
Okay. You should write about what you do and make it into a children's book.
I already have that idea.
And to explain to children that we can't keep using pesticides.
Right. No, I have a whole concept for that as well. I just kind of want to see where this book goes.
Okay.
To see, because it does take a lot, so I want to make sure that I use that time wisely.
Right.
And if that's not going to be the best way to get that information out, you know what I mean?
Right.
I have to feel that out of it, but I do have a title, and that whole thing worked out for that for children too. So
great. So maybe I'll talk to you again.
Hopefully.
All right. Well, you have a great new year.
Thank you. You too.
Our next author is Mary Joyce McNeil Flournoy, or you can just call her Joyce. What's important is the lessons in her book entitled Family, How We Made It Over. So this could be the most names of any author I've ever interviewed.
I did it. I put every one of them on there because of the confusion. Some people calling me Mary Joyce, some people calling me Joyce. And I just thought I put it all on there, and they can call me whatever one they got used to calling me.
All right.
And that's exactly the way they do. Some people say, hello, may I speak to Mary Joyce? Other people say Joyce.
All right. Fair enough. So when did you start writing?
Actually, when I was in high school, my literature teacher had given us an assignment to write the first chapter or so for a short story. And I created an imaginary story. Then we had to read that story before the class. And so I read the story, and they just really loved it. And they pegged me as the first of the class to become an author. And I laughed about it. I didn't take it seriously, but I thought about it. I said, well, what would I write about? And I was in a journalism class at the time because I've always loved to read, and I guess I didn't know that writing would ever be something I would want to do. And the journalism teacher said, well, write about things that you know about. And I thought, well, that makes sense. And so we were at the time trying to determine how I was going to college, and my family was so large, and the children were like back to back. It was the first four of us were about a year apart.
Oh, boy.
And
God bless your mother.
One of their goals was for us to all become educated. It was 7 of us. And, I saw the way my parents' families came in and worked with us and helped us. Some of them didn't have children, and others did have as many children as we had and helped out, helped get us in college and get us out of college. So it was a win-win proposition. This is what inspired my book. They had been doing that all along, working with my parents and helping us, because a lot of her siblings, as I said, did not have children. And she married earliest of all the children. And their mother had passed early in life. And so she just sort of became the mother figure for them. Even though we were not rich by any stretch of the imagination, you didn't feel like it, because those things that we wanted, if we waited long enough, we would find that somebody would come in and help out to get that need, filled for us. When they were toying around with how I was going to go to school, and they worked it out, it just hit me, my goodness, look at how this family works together. And I was sharing it with my best friend, and she was just flabbergasted. She said, what? And I thought, is that really that strange? And so I thought, you know what? This is what I need to share. This is what I need to talk about. That family that came up, they were poor. They weren't rich. They came from a little poor rural city, and they all worked together. It was 10 of them. And they all worked together to help one another. And as I said, we just never had to want for things, because they would always help my parents find a way to do it.
Now, your immediate family stayed in the South, while some members of your family moved north, right?
That's correct. My parents were from a small town in South Carolina, and they were born during the Great Depression. And my mother used to laugh and talk about how they have to stuff their shoes with cardboard because they didn't have money to get new shoes. It was an agrarian economy. Everybody worked in the farm. They supported themselves. There was very little they had to go to the store to buy, because they made their own soap and clothing. And so during the Great Depression, they took a real hit on that, because, the farmers, some were asked not to produce because that was considered to be one of the problems. It was too much out there. So that was, of course, not good news for the little farmer who needed to push what he produced and try to make money with it.
Right.
So my father met my mother and was in love with her and wanted to move, because the Great Migration after the Depression, the Great Migration set in, because the people in these rural counties were trying to get to the cities to be able to make money, right, because there was nothing in farming at that time. Right. So they decided that they were going to go to Charlotte, because that was the place to go. So, and many of their brothers and sisters had gone all the way up to New York and the Bronx and other big cities to make a living, to try to help themselves. Right. But they always maintained contact with one another. They were always there for one another, and nobody suffered. If those made it big or got something extra going for them in New York, they reached back and shared that with those who were in Charlotte. And it was just such a beautiful thing to me to see that, because I thought, gee, how many families operate like that?
I was just going to say that.
When I would share it with my friends, they would say, well, I don't know many that do that. So I thought, well, that's something I need to write about then.
Well, the name of your book is Femme, and then you have...
Lee. And that's the way we pronounced it. That's the way I came up saying it until I went to school and realized there was an extra syllable there that was missing.
So is that an apostrophe? Is it fam?
Yes, that's an apostrophe. Family. That's the way we pronounced it. Coming up. And you'll still hear that now. If you go to very small rural cities and towns in this country, you will hear them say family. That's my family.
And it seems to me the glue that held you together was faith and God.
It's faith in God. Yes, as I said, they were very religious people. They were taught to love and take care of one another, and they did it. But they believed everybody. Your community was a family. Your church was a family. And when my father, when he went to Charlotte, he purchased land and did farming there as well. Even though we were in a city part of Charlotte, but he never let that go because he was taught that you always have something ready to fall back on, and he would give that produce to neighbors and other people who needed it. But because he just liked farming.
So what's your greatest hope for this book?
I tell you what, when I think about how they grew up and how they helped one another, and they all came out fine, I would like to see people become more involved in helping their families and helping other people, not just their families, their community, just like parents did. And it was just a beautiful concept. And I love it. I think if the children, our youth primarily, because I'm a person who works with the youth, I would love to see them embrace this book and realize that, okay, maybe I didn't do this right in life. Their parents begged them not to leave. They didn't think they were ready to live in a big city. But they did not let this hold them back. They had to do jobs that they were not that proud of. Like my mother was a maid for a while, and my father was a delivery boy. But they made promises to themselves that they would climb and keep going until they got to where they wanted to be.
How do people know about your book?
I have friends who are going to do book signing parties for me, and then the publisher, she sent a press release out, and there are people picking up on that as well.
This would be a great book for a book club.
My hope is to get people back to what I call those basics again.
Yeah.
Love and respect and help for one another. I think that's what the world is missing. And if we could get back to that kind of thing, you look out for my children, I'm looking out for yours. I'm taking care, helping. Do you need this for your child? I'll help you with that. And then when I need it, I'm sure you'll come back and help me. I think we're missing that, and that was just such a beautiful period because, as I said, I witnessed it with my parents and their siblings and how it worked for us.
Do you remember Colin Powell?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so he was having some kind of event, some community-based event. So it wasn't like a lot of people there. He was talking about when he grew up and, his whole family was in the Bronx. And he said, we talk a lot about the internet. I had the aunt net. He said he couldn't walk down the street without every eye on him. All the whole family was.
Absolutely. You were everybody's child.
Yes.
Everybody loved you and cared for you and wanted to make sure that you were doing the right thing. And that's not a bad thing. Now people look at it as, oh, you're in my business. Well, maybe we need to have more people in other people's business,
I don't know.
Because that can help, hopefully, keep some of our children from doing things that they shouldn't do.
You are such an inspiration, my friend. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Earl Laman has been writing for most of his life, and as a counselor and minister, he has a deep well of experiences and stories to share, and he drew on all of them for his book entitled Being With.
I started writing when I was in about first grade. I started making up stories about the neighborhood, stories about the racehorse I had, whatever kind of stories. I made up a lot of stories. I wrote poetry, I wrote editorials, I wrote articles, I wrote memoirs. It's been my art and my expression all my life.
And writing was part of the work you did too, right?
Well, for 13 years, I was a minister. And after that, I went into doctoral studies and became a marriage and family psychotherapist.
So I guess that gave you a lot to draw on for your book.
It's based on my 30 years of work, especially with young adults. The clinic of which I was a part, we were a referral center for several colleges, graduate schools, and seminaries. And so I spent a good many years working with young adults. And I loved that work because it was an opportunity to work with young lives before they became chronic and reactive and set in their ways.
So your main character is Jack, and what happens to him?
It follows the story of a young adult person who ran away from his background, which was harsh and not giving. And he journeyed around in the West for a while, and then came back after a traumatic experience. He came back to the Midwest on a whim of a man that he met who was very kind to him. And he settled into a town that I invented called Mitten Lake, Michigan. It's a small lake town, and that's where the action all takes place, in and around that town. It traces back into what he ran away from, and really it involves all the people, young and old, who then took part in his life, contributed to his life, impacted his life, and were the redemptive people in his life.
What was he running from?
He's running from the harshness and the emptiness of his background. His background, his father was an industrialist, and they were in high society, and he grew up with all the expectations and all the demands and all the behaviors that such a background demands.
What are some of the key relationships he has?
The key relationship in the early part of the book is his brother, whom he lost, who is his only intimate person of his life. And he ran away for 11 years and serpentined through the West, and what he considered wasted his life, until he followed that whim that brought him back to this little town, and the key person of the later part of his life. First, it's three old women who take him in as a caretaker, and that's where things begin. And the rest of the book is one of the granddaughters of one of those old women becomes a key person in his life. I wanted to illustrate how our lives mean so much to other people, and other people's lives mean so too much.
Yeah, we don't even realize how intertwined we all are.
That's right. But I'm trying to make it a real life, but not a super sensational kind of a thing, but a real life experience that he had that people need if their lives are ever going to be changed into something much better. Other people are part of it. Other people are key to it. That's why I love the book, because it's real. And I hope that the characters inside the book are appealing, and in the parts that they played in his life, and he played in theirs. They accept him as he is, and they are loving people. They are giving people, and he's the person who receives this to the great benefit of his life.
Well, we could all use a little bit of that, huh, Earl?
Certainly can. When I think of this book, I think of a few key people that fit that category, where there was just too much in life, too much in their young life to make them know that they were loved, to know that they were cherished, to know that they were helped in life and to meet life. And there was so little of the basic kind of things that we all need as children. And yet the book is trying to illustrate that this can be changed, this can be renewed, this can be discovered, this can be a becoming of a different person.
So hence the title, Being With.
We are always being with other people. We are such a part of each other's lives. Being with of his young adulthood and his escape, and the people that he was being with actually became a real living part of the redemption of his life, of the finding of a whole new life and reason to be, to become, to belong, and to believe. Just add one thing about fiction.
Okay.
I write fiction mostly. I'm thinking of a quotation from Auguste Vergès, the author. He said, "Fiction is the big lie that tells the truth of how people live in this world."
Amen on that, Earl.
Amen.
Now, you told me you're particularly proud of this book. Why is that?
I self-published 2 books, and I've published other smaller books just locally and so on. But this book I am more deeply resonant with, I'll say it, I'm more deeply proud of all I put into it over the last 5 years.
Well, you should be, Earl. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to meet you. Bye for now.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. We hope to see you back here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore. We're in